Hi there and welcome. We're glad you joined us today for our first 2025 webinar. We hope your new year is off to a great start, and we're excited to spend a little bit of time with you today talking about something that's near and dear to our heart, helping business owners like you figure out how to grow, thrive, and eventually plan for what's next. As we kick off this new year and a new tradition, I want to give you a glimpse of what you can expect moving forward. We're planning on doing one of these the first Tuesday of every month. We'll dive into topics that are critical for business owners like you, whether it's scaling your business, increasing its value, or planning for a successful exit when the time is right. These webinars are all about real-world lessons from our own experiences in running, growing, and exiting businesses and providing actionable insights for you. For those of you that don't know us, I'm Dale Thrush, partner at By Design Advisors, and I'm here with my two other partners, Marty Osborne and Tom Johnson. The three of us started this because we were where you were. We know what it's like to have big dreams for our business while at the same time dealing with the challenges of trying to grow that business. In today's session, we want to take you behind the curtain, share a little bit about why we started By Design Advisors, our vision for how we can support you, and most importantly, practical strategies that you can implement right away to prepare for what's next. We also want to make sure this session is as helpful as possible, so there will be some time at the end to ask questions. So if something pops into your brain, write it down, pop it into the chat, and we'll get to as many as we can during this episode. But if not, we'll reach back out and answer all the questions later on. So whether you're here to scale your business, prepare for an exit, or simply gain clarity about what your next steps are, we're glad you're here. So let's dive in and let's make 2025 the year of intentional growth and design for your business and your future. Tom, Marty, welcome.
Good morning. Glad to be here. Happy New Year to both you guys. Looking forward to the year of intentionality, 2025.
Yeah, thanks. It's exciting to be here. This has kind of been a lot in the works as we've started By Design. I think we got really excited this summer to start something new after both of us, Tom and I, exited our businesses, and Dale, basically exiting out from the company that acquired us. So to be able to share these strategies, exciting.
Strategies and lessons learned. It was a very eye-opening year, a couple years for me going through the exit process and the merger and acquisition project, and I'm excited to share some of those hard lessons with others so they maybe can handle it a little bit better. Great. Want to get started. What is the dream? So again, why are we here? Why did we start By Design Advisors? It's because every business owner wishes of one day exiting their business successfully. I know Tom and Marty, you guys have started several businesses. Maybe talk a little bit about what your wish was of that exit strategy, or if you even thought about it back in those early days.
It's a great question because I've been through the process multiple times, and the first couple of times was not prepared at all. Hadn't planned at all. And in both those cases, it did not go very well. And actually, one of them succeeded to be exited, but at a horrible price. And the other one we never really exited. And so the third time through it, planned years in advance at planning and preparing and trying to maximize the value of our company before we even got to the point where we figured out how to exit.
Nice. Yeah, Tom, you always say something I find very interesting is the best time to start this process was 3 years ago. The next best time is today.
Is today, exactly.
So yeah. Marty, what about you?
Well, it's funny. I think Tom and I go back quite a ways, and we've talked ever since college. Obviously, when you start a business, right, the dream is to exit, to have, a really good event. But most of us have gone through, I probably had 3 businesses that either I've walked away or they ended up just shutting down. And, when I think back about it, we never really had a game plan. And that's what I think as we started By Design kind of spoke to me is when I finally became intentional. And with the last business at Voco, we became intentional, although I still didn't have the information I needed, ended up exiting profitably and I think excitedly in favor.
It's interesting. So one of the stats, and you'll hear a lot of stats today, we'll throw out some numbers, is 80% of business owners don't have a plan in place to make the dream of successful exit a reality? And you both just mentioned, when you guys started, you guys didn't have a plan either. So talk a little bit about maybe why owners do not have a plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say, the one thing I always thought about this is it says 80%. The number sounds actually higher. I figure it's probably 90% don't have a plan. I mean, when we talk to business owners, and again, I think it's a real challenge. And I think, why is always up for debate. But
Yeah, I'd agree with you, Marty. I've never met an owner who actually has a plan, and what I've seen is that they're so busy running that day to day of their business and trying to figure out how to get through next week and next month that they in the back of their mind they know that they want to exit someday, but they have no time to think about that. So they just keep putting it off and never think about it.
yeah, and it's funny. We've talked about this, and time is one of them. I also think, and I think this is probably the hardest thing, is just fear. I know in my case, like fear always played into it because either one, it's not going to achieve what we hope to achieve. B is, well, we start worrying about what's going to happen to our customers, what's going to happen to our people, what's going to happen. And what happens is it becomes very me focused. And I found that to be the problem is we start stressing over this stuff because we're worried about me, when in actuality, the business is an entity and it's a business of we. And so to me, when you start talking about the word exit, it really is a strategy that encompasses your customers, your people, yourself, your family, like all those pieces, and really is important to do, whether you're planning to exit today or sometime in the future. Having a plan is so important.
Yeah, and I think it's also just a lack of knowledge, right, about the process and what drives the numbers, and just if you don't know, it can be overwhelming to start digging into, and that's what we're kind of hoping with these webinars. We can share some of that knowledge, share some of our experiences, so it is a little easier to understand.
I know when I was going through it, I wish this was available to me.
So again, the reality is, by Design Advisors, if you don't have a plan in place, you're leaving that exit to chance. And that's really what we're hoping to help business owners with, right? Is not leaving that exit to chance. I think one of you, I forget who it's, Marty, it might be Tom, is every business will transition eventually, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting when our last exit, when we did it right and actually started the process years before we exited, we talked throughout the company that we considered our business to be a 100-year business. It was going to be around for 100 years, but the current owners weren't going to be around for 100 years. So we had to figure out how to transition it. And that got us started on this plan for figuring out how and when and how to maximize the value between now and that when.
It's interesting. You talk about that 100-year plan. And one of the things that I think probably gave me more comfort was a book called The Infinite Game. And, what he talks about is the infinite game is a game that goes on forever versus a finite game like baseball or football where there's winners and losers and the game ends. Realistically, in business, our business or our market's going to go on forever. So the business is going to live whether we're there or not. It's just how long we want to play that game. And so when you start thinking about business and everything else as more of an infinite game than just a finite game, it also is that kind of change in mindset that when we look at an exit plan or transition, it doesn't mean the business stops or the market stops. It just means that there's going to be different players in that game.
And here's the secret, right? Exit planning is just good business strategy. Right. Everything that you do in exit planning, you should be doing anyways, because, again, your business is either growing or it's not. And hopefully, it is, because that's when you get the successful exits.
Exactly right. The third option that we've talked about, if it's not growing or you're not going to exit, is you're going to fail. And so it is. It's just good business. Even if your exit is 20 years off, the principles of exit planning make for good business.
And again, I think you bring up a great point is, if you really think about businesses, you're either growing or exiting. And really the third alternative is you're beginning to fail, because one of the things, and I've seen this, is you could be a growing business, you get the $3-4 million, and we'll talk more about this later, is when businesses start to plateau, you're like, well, hey, it's a good running business. The problem is, and we've probably seen this more in the last few years, is inflation starts killing us, right? It starts eroding. People want more money. Things start costing more. And at the end of the day, it's not sustainable. So to us, when we look at this as business owners, we really either have to be planning to grow or planning to exit, because the third alternative, I mean, do you plan to fail?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
No, you fail by chance.
You fail to not plan, or you fail by chance. So I think it's a great piece.
Let's talk about a couple of scary numbers. We call them the rule of 80. And that's 80% of an owner's wealth is trapped in their company, right? We always say it's their biggest asset and their biggest liability. 80% of businesses that are put on the market never sell. And 80% of a company's value is in its intangibles assets. Now, I want to circle back around and take these one by one. But the first one was 80% of an owner's wealth is trapped in their company. And trapped is an interesting word. Maybe we want to talk a little bit about what we mean by it's trapped in their company.
Yeah.
Well, any business owner's ownership in their company is an asset like any other asset. And they may have a home and they may have a stock portfolio, other things. But the 80% that is made up by their ownership in their business is not a liquid asset. It's not something that you can call up your broker tomorrow and sell and get the cash because you need it. So it is trapped until you can go through a process to exit that business.
Yeah, we've seen it with private businesses, and I was thinking on the reverse as somebody said, hey, I invested in a small business. And what ends up happening is that money you give is trapped in there because it's not a stock, right? It's not liquid. I can't turn around and sell it tomorrow. The only way I ultimately get my money back is there has to be some liquidation or some transaction. And so I know anybody who's ever sold a business, and I know myself and Tom, is that in that transition is we unlocked a lot of great wealth. And, then that becomes liquid, but it's kind of scary to think about how much of our money and assets is really tied up in that business.
Yeah. And that's the key to exit planning, right? It helps you harvest that value and get it out of there. Now let's go to the next one, because I think this one is pretty scary too. 80% of businesses that are put on the market never sell.
And again, I think it goes back to the first bullet of 80% of our money is tied up in the company, yet 80% never sell. That's kind of scary. And you could say, okay, well, what are the reasons, right? Everybody thinks, well, I have a business, I have revenue, I have money, I have customers. Why would it not sell? But there's a lot of factors that go into that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the ones that in lots of owners that I've known that have tried to sell their business and don't ultimately succeed, it comes down to a huge gap between the expectation of what they can get out of that business and the reality. They haven't planned. They just wake up one morning and decide it's time to get out. But because they haven't planned, what they can actually get at that point is nowhere near what they need to live their lifestyle.
And the last one is 80% of a company's value is in its intangible assets, not on the balance sheet.
Yeah. And that's, I think, an interesting statistic when we say it. And I'm sure most people listening are like, okay, Dale, what is it? What is that? What is that 80% and what does that represent?
Yeah. And we kind of define it as the 4 C's, right? It's your customer capital, your structural capital, your social capital, and your human capital. Mm-hmm. And we're going to get into each one of these a little bit more, but those are the 4 C's that are going to drive 80% of your value.
Yeah. I love when this came out and we started learning about this, because what was interesting is I never really thought about it that way. I think probably intuitively we kind of know this, but I think what we start to learn is when you start spelling it out this way, you're like, oh, wow. And how can I ultimately affect each one to drive greater value?
Yeah, we talked about just a slide ago, right? 80% of companies never sell. It's usually because one or more of these C's is out of whack, right? And they don't address it. And a company comes in, looks at it, and just says, nope, there's too many red flags in a certain C or all the C's, and they just move on to the next opportunity.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think this is a great way to break down and kind of codify what that whole intangible asset is. Like Marty was saying, intrinsically, we know that what shows up on the balance sheet is not necessarily what a company will sell for. So it is made up of these intangibles, but what are those intangibles? And to break it down into these 4 C's makes it really simple and gives us kind of a roadmap as to what to work on.
You know what's interesting, and this is probably an interesting conversation. It's just kind of as I think about it is when we think about value and we say that 80% of a value is not on the balance sheet because that's the intangibles. If you really think about it, all a balance sheet tells us is whether we're sinking, are we floating or sinking, right? I mean, you know it, Tom, from the numbers. There are things in the balance sheet, whether it's cash flow or cash on hand or receivables or payables, kind of tells us whether we're okay or not or sinking, but it doesn't talk about value.
Yeah, the current balance sheet gives you a little bit more of a flavor of what your liquidity is as a business rather than what the value of the business is. And these go back to these 4 C's. The value, 80% of the value of your business, and in many cases more than 80% of the value of the business is really in the structure of the business and those other capital types of capital that we mentioned here.
Yeah. By the way, it's funny talking through it. It actually reminds me of one of my earlier stories and probably one of my bigger failures in a business I started right out of college. But when we were trying to develop the value on the in our contract, our buy-sell agreement said the value of the business is calculated as assets minus liabilities plus all other assets and all other liabilities. What was interesting is I think my partner wanted all our liabilities because I think he got burned on some hidden stuff behind. But when we sold it, basically the balance sheet said the company was 0. So he wanted to give us 0, but it forgot about goodwill.
Right.
And we talk about goodwill, and that was the fight. And we ended up having to go to court over this 80% because there's no way to necessarily prove it. And so I got hit with this, and ultimately, based on a whole lot of circumstances, we got ruled against and we got 0 because we didn't really have these spelled out.
Yeah, so let's go through these. The first C is customer capital, right? And that's the value and strength and depth of your relationships with your customers. So let's talk a little bit about maybe what's a good customer capital and what's maybe a lower multiple customer
Well,
capital.
yeah, good customers are a broad base of customers. You don't want a high concentration of your accounts in 1 or 2 customers. You also want customers that are probably bigger companies that have the ability to grow with you and pay you when you provide your goods or services.
Yeah, this one's always an interesting one because there's probably no one rule of thought other than, and Dale, you and I have seen it a number of times where we've heard stories where somebody lost their customer was 80% of their revenue. Now they're all excited. Oh, I have this big name company, 80%, and they're all that. But you're going to get that phone call one day, either A, we're leaving, or B, you have to do better on price.
I want a better price.
Price. And so you end up getting burned. So I think probably the first thing that sinks most people in this area is lack of diversification.
Yeah, it's definitely, you want to look at those top revenue generators. What percentage of your customer base are they, and yeah, where's your risk at when you come to those? The second one is structural capital, right? So this is all your back end infrastructure. That's could be a little boring to folks, but let's talk about the structural capital of a company as well.
Yeah, structural capital may be boring, but it's really important to a buyer because what you're buying as a business is a business that can operate without you, the owner, and having all kinds of processes in place, documentation, having people that can operate the business day by day without you is really important to your next owner.
Yeah. One thing I would say about this one, which I think is interesting, is there's really not strategic value here. It more is, do you pass the gate, right? Because again, we've seen if the owner's too involved or if there's no process involved, you're going to get knocked out of the game. Nobody really buys a company because they have great processes. It's almost like expected.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's it probably doesn't add as much as it subtracts if you don't have it.
Yeah.
And I think the key word's documented, right? How many times do we go into a business? Oh yeah, we have a process for that. Okay, well, let's see it. Oh, well, it's just in my head or something like that. So I think one of the keys is just making sure you have some of this stuff documented and down so it connects the people to the knowledge is really what, to me, what structural capital does is connects the people to the knowledge to get a job done. The third one being social capital. So this is your company culture and brand.
Yeah, this one's I always laugh because I was sitting in my entree leadership. I have a mastermind group, and we were talking about this. And one of the things that we did was they actually surveyed our employees. So they asked us when we went into the meeting to give us 5 names, where then they sent them a survey to kind of rate us. And one of the guys came back, kind of got beat up a little bit by his people. And he was like, well, maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong. And so the first thing one of the other guys in the group says, well, let's go to your Indeed. Let's go look online to see what people are saying about you. And sure enough, it repeated almost the same things. Yep. Management wasn't listening. Structurally, things are messed up. And so social capital can be just things that are even just out there that other people are saying about you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you talk about this, not to put a plug for your book, but you talk about your leadership brand. To me, that's a big driver of the social capital, right? What's your leadership brand? What's your organizational brand? How do you do business? What do you value? What do you reward? All that stuff, to me, goes into your social capital.
Absolutely. I think you need that kind of brand to attract top-tier customers and top-tier employees. Otherwise, you're not going to get there.
Yeah. I don't think we're not going to get into it this session. We'll definitely get it later. But when we start to talk about value and getting price, right, is that range of value. Because, typically, you get paid based on sales or revenue times some multiplier. And a lot of that multiplier number is going to be based on social capital, right? If you have low social capital, high turnover, my guess is there's something there that's going to hurt you in value.
Yep. And the last one being human capital. And this is, to put it simply, the value of the talent in your company, right?
Yeah. I think this one's 80% of the 80%.
I agree.
Yeah.
This is where I think at Advoco and Dale, we lived and died by, I think there was a great interview with Schultz from Starbucks. Howard Schultz, yeah, where he basically said, we're not in the coffee business, we're in the people business. Coffee is something we do, but yet every business is in the people business, but yet they don't act like it or operate like it.
Yeah, I've always said you win or lose with your people. Your people, you could have the greatest idea, the greatest product, but if you don't have the right people, you're not going to be able to execute on that idea or product.
Yep, I agree 100%. This is probably the one that is underserved the most by business owners. And it's, of the 4, probably the most important.
Why do you think that? Why do you think it's underserved?
I just think that business owners start with whether it's a startup or what, you start with a concept of what product you're going to make, what service you're going to deliver, and you get tied up in, okay, I'm going to provide this great product or service, and here's all the things that I need to do that. And you don't think enough about how do I build an organization that can grow and that can do this without me. And the way to do that is you have to set up an environment that will attract the best people.
Let's be honest, people are difficult, right? We all have our own individual wants. We have our own individual challenges. And I know big companies want to put everybody in a box. They want to treat everybody equal, and you can't. So I think sometimes from an ownership standpoint, it's a lot of work. And I think at the end of the day, we end up avoiding that stuff because we don't want to deal with the problems. We want to push those things off. And Dave Ramsey always said, business would be easy if people weren't involved.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
But they are,
yeah,
and
it's hard. That's why they don't spend the time on it.
And I don't know anymore, Dale, because I really know this is your specialty. This is the world you live in.
Yeah, I could talk about this for hours and hours on end, where companies will say we value our people, right, and people are our most important assets, and then everything they do is the exact opposite of that. I always go to the story of I was in a manufacturing plant who was running overtime for about a year straight, weekends, 24/7. People were getting burnt out, and the plant manager said, you know what, we're going to take Christmas Eve and Christmas Day off, made a big announcement about a week or two before Christmas. You guys have worked hard, you get it off. Well, one of our biggest customers dropped an order in Christmas week. Guess what happened to those days off on Christmas Day and Christmas? It didn't happen. So you're basically saying widgets out the door are the most important things, right? And leaving your team to chance is leaving your exit to chance. So how do you
Yeah.
get very deliberate with your people? How do you, to Tom's point, how do you build that team from the start, being very deliberate? We use a bunch of assessments and tools for that. But yeah, you have to build a team that can continue to succeed and grow without you being there.
Yeah. I wish they would just write on the wall. Like we always said, here, our mission statement is we put profits above people. Just say it, right? Because, I mean, that's what they said. Like, we want you to have time off. They could have gone back to that customer and said, I'm sorry, but our people matter. They need the time off. We're going to be more productive. But what'd they do? They chose basically profits over people. And that's just, it ain't right. And I think it's why this piece becomes so important.
Yeah, and again, when you're thinking about the exit to we talked about earlier, 100-year plan, but the owners aren't going to be there 100 years, right? So how do you keep developing that next generation of leaders and people that can continue the growth of the company? And that's what buyers are looking for, right? They want to see that continued growth. So a question we love to ask owners when we meet with them is, what's keeping you up at night? And as we all gone around and talked to business owners, some common themes keep popping up. Just want to kind of take them one by one of what we found. And the first one being, owners feel like they're stuck or their business has plateaued.
Yeah, that's one that, and it's interesting. I think we mentioned fear in the third bullet here, but I think all four of them have a little bit to do with fear. I know when I got up in the middle of the night, it was always, I was scared about something, and being scared about being stuck is one of those things, because when you're stuck, you don't know which way to turn, what to do next, and that's a very uncomfortable feeling.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things is that keeps you up is when you get stuck. Right back to we talked about, like when you plateau, right? Sales, you might be at a good number. You might be 3, 5, 10, 20, whatever that number is, but you get stuck and you plateau and you don't know what's next. And the fear is costs are rising. What if I lose a customer? What do I need to do? And so a lot of times I think you have to turn to knowledge, right? You have to turn to learning something. And I know in our case with Evoco, I think it was like 2017 or 2016, we were stuck. We didn't know what to do. And so we ended up saying, we need to go find a seminar, go find something. And we ended up going to Dave Ramsey's Entree Leaders. I think it was a master series where they 4 days talked about hiring, firing, mission, vision, values. And I swear I've never been so fired up, right? 4 days of education that just almost started telling me what was next. And I don't know if you remember, I came back and the first thing I did, as I said, I became a born again businessman because I now knew what we needed to do. And I literally stood in front of the company and said, we're going to double in the next 3 years. And people kind of looked at me like, what? Over the next 3 years, we actually went 4X. And it was because at the time when you start feeling stuck, you don't know. And so to me, the best thing you can do is look for knowledge, look for information, go look for somebody who's done it before to help you get unstuck.
Yeah. And I feel like ownership is a very lonely place sometimes. And you get stuck, and who do you turn to? Yeah, you can turn to a wife, a spouse, your friends, but maybe they have never been in that situation. So I think all these that we're going to talk about kind of go back to that too, to where ownership can just be a lonely place.
Yeah. They call it, it definitely is called that way. And I also think that you will feel stuck. Like it's not if. I mean, very few businesses, and we ended up, had a business coach, and we were riding that wave for a while. And I remember Chris would always say, like, you're going to get stuck. You're going to get burned sooner or later. Like, it doesn't always work this way. And sure enough, when we got stuck, remember, we kind of freaked out a little bit.
Yeah. And so the next one is we've talked about it a little bit already, but they're worried you don't have a plan or control over your next steps.
Yeah, and I think this goes to a lot of business owners feel this, that they become a slave to the business, to the day-to-day operations of the business, and they don't have any time or, I don't know, even mind space to figure out how to control what's next with the business. And so that feeling is, again, it's like being totally lost, and you have the worst job going because you've got this unreasonable owner, which is the business itself, that keeps dragging you into to a place you don't want to be, and you don't know how to change it.
Yeah, Avoca, what we call it managing in the chaos, right? Managing
Yeah.
in the tornado. As you're growing and things are just moving so rapidly, it's easy to just get swept up in it and kind of lose control.
Yeah, I mean, everybody loves to say, I need to work on the business, not in the business. And people say it all the time. Kind of drives me nuts because it's so easy to say. Yet every day when you look at owners, or it was the whirlwind. If you remember, I think it was a book we read called the 5DX, 40X by Covey. And he always said you have to find that wildly important goal to recenter yourself. Because if we don't, we just get stuck in the whirlwind. And I mean, Tom, you talked about it, but I don't know, where did you guys turn when you got stuck?
So, we worked with some outside coaches that helped us because I think we were guilty. Every business owner is guilty of the same thing, which is you get running on that treadmill and you kind of lose track of where am I going and how am I intentional about getting there. And I think we were smart enough to realize that we couldn't do it ourselves. So we brought in some outside people and worked with them for years to help us refocus and take a step back and figure out how to get unstuck and figure out where we wanted to go and then what was the plan for that.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing, and I'm glad you brought that up, because as business owners, our ego tries to tell us, we're the one in charge, but at some point in time, we have a lot of blind spots and we don't see it. And I think in that case, by bringing somebody from the outside, they can help us identify a blind spot or get us to think about something maybe we wouldn't have thought about. So,
yeah, fresh perspective's always good. And we always say, sometimes the team that got you here is not the ones that get you there. And that's another issue with all of these, right? Like you might
that's
have
another big topic.
Yeah, you might have a great team that got you here. But another thing that's keeping owners up at night are they're fearful that they haven't unlocked the business's true value.
Yeah, I think that's, first, and we'll talk about this a little bit too, it's understanding, what is the value of your business and what is the potential value of your business. So I think, number one, a lot of business owners aren't even really sure what the potential value is. So they're kind of flying blind a little bit because they may not know exactly what their business is worth, and they don't know what it should be worth if it was, best in class, run really well.
Yeah. And I think they're also looking just for a roadmap. I mean, it's like, why do we go to a trainer? Why do we, if we want to be able to run a marathon, like there's a process for doing that. I think people don't know how, because again, when you're plateauing, when you're feeling stuck, how do I unlock the value? How do I get maybe what I believe I deserve or where I want to be? Because, for me to get to retirement age or for me to get to a point where I can survive on the money, I have to reach a certain value. And so that can be very stressful as well.
Yeah, and just knowing those numbers, I think, help a lot,
Yeah.
right? You may never get to that number, but at least you know it's out there. And then another thing that's keeping them up at night is uncertain about where your business stands. And I think we've kind of talked about that a little bit, about the value, the what drives the value, what are the levers you can pull, all that stuff I think kind of goes under this uncertain about where your business stands.
Yeah, absolutely. And value is a big part of it, is understanding where you are and where you could be. But there's also an understanding of where are you within your industry and how much is your industry changing and all of those things that I think get business owners to wake up in the middle of the night and wonder about that and get a little fearful of it.
Yeah, we won't get into it. I think we'll get into it another session. But one of the first things we do when we work with clients is understand risk, right? Mm-hmm. We understand one of the first steps before you can even grow a business. Sometimes you got to de-risk the business, mm-hmm. right? Sit back and look at what's driving it. Are we at risk based on a customer, as we talked about? Do we have some technology that maybe is about ready to get superseded or get eliminated, or AI is going to take over or something like that? And so one of the things that I do believe, and I think there's a lot of stress, is having somebody come in and help you understand risk. So that step one is, how do we de-risk the business before we start to grow?
Yeah, so we have a bunch of owners that are up at night, right, worrying about these things. So how does By Design Advisors help them. And what we like to say is we help business owners create a roadmap for what's next while not navigating the challenges of growing your business or planning an exit. So our solution to what's keeping you up at night is really, Marty, I borrow this from you all the time, is making the unconscious conscious.
Yeah.
And you do that by creating that roadmap for what's next.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I borrow that from Marty as well. And it's the other word that he uses a lot that I have been using more and more is just being intentional. You sleep much better at night if you're intentional.
Yeah, it's I actually wish I could take credit for it, but I stole it from Eckhart Tolle. He wrote a book called The Power of Now. And what happens is when you think about day in and day out, it's like driving. Sometimes you're like, wow, how did I get here? Because your brain was working. In business, every day it's so unconscious. And how do we make that more conscious? And I believe like goal setting, the power of goal setting isn't in the goal itself. The power of it is making certain activities more conscious oriented. And so to us, what we can do is come in and help you with that roadmap and how to build a plan. And when you do that, you start to see where you want to go. And I think it makes the journey a whole lot easier.
So let's talk about how we do that, right? And we have a simple three-step process. The first one is discover, the second one is decide, and the third one is do. So let's talk about discover. And I'll let you kind of take this over, Marty, but discover is where are you now?
Yeah. So this one's always interesting because when we bring it up to people, a lot of people have gone through assessments over and over again. I think we've kind of got assessment crazy, and people are like, we've already done it over and over again. Yet I think what's important here is not just really the word assessment, but we call it the way to value, and way starts with where are you? And I was laughing because I was in New York. I spent a lot of time there, and somebody would be like, what subway do I take to get to this restaurant? And the first question I'm going to ask them, well, where are you? Right? I can't tell you what train to take if I don't know where you are. And so to us, the first step in any one, which is part of enlightenment, which is part of identifying blind spots, is understanding where are you.
And this can be scary, right? Because you're holding a mirror up to your business, and you may find out that your business isn't worth what you thought it was, right? And that's okay because, again, going through this process, at least we know, right? We know where we are. The next step will be where are we going? But you have to Marty's point, you have to know, even if it's not the greatest news, you need to know where you're starting from.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. There is this fear that all business owners have that they're not quite sure they want to dig in deep and find out exactly where they are right now, because it might not be good news. It might not be, the business may be fairly profitable and they may be making a nice living off of it, but they may find that it's got a lot of risk in it and that it's perhaps not worth as much as they thought it was worth. And that's scary.
Yeah. And we talk a lot about the business, right? Where the business is currently. But the other piece of that is, where is the owner currently?
Yeah.
A lot of companies don't sell because the owner's just not ready. So where are you personally, financially, just in your life? Where are you now is an important question to answer during this process.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I think we fail to recognize that. And I think we focus so much on the business, maybe because it's less personal. Whereas when we start to ask the question, like, where are you at personally? And it's funny because I read a lot online about businesses being sold. And I was just reading a piece the other day, and literally they got to the finish line and the deal didn't close. The owner backed out, and everybody's writing like, you should have done this contractually, you should have done that. And I'm like, no, you know what? I think one of the hardest things as business owners is we don't know. Like, until we're in that situation, until we're almost faced with the cliff, it's easy to say we should know what we're going to do next, but it's not that easy.
No, it's not. And I think that's, there's the financial piece of it, which we talk a lot about. Exit the businesses just put you in a position financially that will set you up for the rest of your life or not. And then, but even more important than that, it's the personal part of, okay, if I exit my business, which has been a huge part of my life, what do I do then? What do I do with my time? I can sit on the beach and drink Mai Tais for like 2 weeks, but what do I do after that?
Yeah.
Yeah, and Marty, I'm going to disagree with you a little bit. You said a lot of folks are assessment out, which I agree with. But I do think assessments are important. But you have to find the right ones, right? To me, that my biggest complaints with assessments usually are they're just too complicated, they're too hard to understand, they're too hard to remember what they even told you. But you know, at By Design Advisors, we do use 3 assessments in this discovery phase, right? We use the business attractiveness assessment, which basically just is from an outside perspective, how attractive is your company to a potential buyer. We do a business readiness assessment. So that's more of an internal perspective on how ready your business is to transfer. And then the other one is what we kind of talked about here is the personal readiness, right? Like how ready are you to transfer or transition into something else? So our assessments, you know, I'm a little biased, but I think we try to find simple ones that are effective, measure what we need to measure, and are easy to come up with actionable items from.
Well, if you think about one of our goals when we started By Design, we set out to say we believe in simplicity over complexity. And I think that's what happens is 150 questions, like on and on and on. Like they got to be quick, they got to be simple, and they got to be really by design that tells you where you want to go, because ultimately they become the roadmap, right? It's never whether you're good or bad. It just says where do you stand, which then builds that roadmap. So in the attractiveness side is there are certain things. If your customer, as we talked about, if you're very heavy in 1 or 2 customers, it's going to build a roadmap very simply to do that. Or if you have certain unprofitable customers or whatever. So I think that's, if the assessments are directed towards a purpose, they really work better.
Yeah, I mean, everybody has limited time and resources, right? So how do you prioritize? How do you find those big levers? So that's a lot on the discover phase, right? Where are you now? The way to value. Our second step is where do you want to go, right? So to your direction, if you say, hey, I'm at 5th Street and whatever, and how do I get? And you don't know where you're going, that's a problem too. So our first step is where are you? Second step is where do you want to go?
Yeah.
And this is personally, financially, and organizationally, right? Because all 3 of those 3 legs of a stool, you need to make sure all 3 of those are aligned in order to be successful and probably exit when you want to exit.
Right. And we talk a lot about exiting, but this might be that you're not ready for exit. Exit might be 20 years off, but that's fine. It's still a great time to plan for that 20 years from now that you are going to have the exit, because the principles that you're going to put in place are going to help your business, going to help it run more efficiently. It's going to help it day to day between now and 20 years from now.
You know, I actually wrote a piece. I used to have a blog called Marty's Minute. Then I wrote a blog called GPS is Ruining Us, right?
Yeah,
because we think like we get in our car and it says you're 12 minutes to home, or you're like, we can go to Waze and it'll tell us exactly how long, where to get there. And we kind of sometimes think in business, or if we just do this assessment, it's going to tell us where to go. Yeah. And it doesn't. And I used to laugh. I always said my favorite business story actually came from a children's book in Alice in Wonderland, right? If you remember Alice talking to the Cheshire Cat, and she looks at him and says, which road should I take? And Cheshire Cat says, well, where do you want to go? And she says, I don't know. And then he says, well, any road will get you there. Right. And I think that's when we're unconscious. What happens is when we don't know, any road's taking us wherever. And so this piece in deciding doesn't necessarily mean that's the end goal, but in that decision, we can help you start to figure out what's next. And through what's next, then you can plan that target.
And this, to me, is one of the fun ones. I mean, they're all fun, but I really love getting in and helping companies and owners kind of figure out where do you want to go, and helping them start to create that roadmap. And then the third one, so we know where we are, we know where we're going. Now, to me, the key and the differentiator between successful and significant is the third step, right? The do, which we kind of dub relentless execution.
Yeah. I mean, do is always, it's funny, as I think this is what separates By Design from the others, is that ability to then execute. And that's what at Advoco we became really good at. I know, Tom, you guys at Conifer, like execution was one of your strong suits. Is what happens when we need to put a game plan in place, but moving forward, we have like 22 strategic things, right? We never get stuff done. And, the people that are out there are really good at maybe doing assessments or talking about where you want to go. but they're very short on how to get there strategically. So I think this is a big, big factor in the third piece.
Yeah, and this kind of goes to the assessment conversation we just had. I know talking with several owners, they'll bring somebody in and they do these assessments, they talk, they do interviews, and then they're just left with a big report with 200 things that they have to address. And again, limited time, limited resources. You're still trying to run the business day to day. Who the heck's going to get to that 200 item checklist, right? That you have to decide. So yeah, this is again, part of what I love to do is helping them decide, but then that relentless execution, we do it in 90-day sprints, very focused, very relentless effort to accomplish 2 to 3 things only for 90 days. And then I love the question we ask at the end of every 90 days. It's a simple one, and it's just, is it done?
Is it done? That's right. Yeah, I think, and what's important to remember about this whole process is that we're there to coach you. We're not going to come in and tell you specifically that this is what you should want and this is what you should do. We're going to help you work through that process and then coach your team to execute on that. But this is really up to the owner and his or her team to decide where they want to go and how to get there.
Yeah, I think one thing I would just jump in here in the do, and I know you guys did it through the Rockefeller Rocks when you were at Conifer. At Advoco, we did something called Working, Broken, Missing. But one of the keys here, and I think if there's a really key takeaway, is that in this 90-day sprint and do is you can only do 3 strategic things. Like people line up 10, 12 things. They have no shot at getting them done. And, there are things they're going to do naturally in their business. But one of the things we'll help you focus on is 3 strategic things for 90 days. And that's what we're going to knock out. And when we knock it out, the next 90 days, you get 3 more. And so at the end of the year, you get 12 strategic things, which is a lot. But you have to stay focused. And I think this is where, and we needed a coach, remember, to help us do this, because without the coach, we had 1A, 1B, 1C. We tried to sneak all these things in. And he can say, you can try it, but you're going to fail. And I think we tried to do 6 or 7, and I think we failed.
When we got to the end, and is it done?
Is it done? Well, maybe not. Right. And so I think that's really the big keys here in the do is every 90 days, and that pursuit of relentless execution is picking 3 things.
I think another key takeaway for the do is your team may not be great at this the first time, and that's fine. We just said we weren't great at it. We tried to do everything, but it's to me, relentless execution is a muscle, and the more you practice it, the more you get into this flow, the better and better you're going to get. As we saw at Advoco, the first time we did it, maybe we got half, maybe not even that much. But by the end, we were a well-oiled machine. We would pick our 3, we would bang them out. Is it done? Yes, yes, yes. Boom, let's go to and that's what we want to coach and help your team do is basically take over the process, and you may not even need us down the road, right? Because we want you to work that muscle and really have that relentless execution, which again, I think is a competitive differentiator.
Yes.
To a lot of companies. I think execution is something that's missing from a lot of companies.
I mean, I say it all the time as I laugh is there's no such thing as a $1 billion idea, only a $1 billion execution. Yeah. And if you think about it, you could say, well, Airbnb or Uber or whatever, they were relentless in their execution. Because their ideas, there was a bunch of people that had these ideas that fail all the time. And so to me, this is what separates good companies from great companies.
Yeah, that 3 for 3 every quarter beats the heck out of 0 for 20, which is what most companies.
Right.
You put 20 out there and you get none of them done. You focus in on 3 and get all 3 of them done. You get by the end of the year you've done 12 as opposed to 0 for 80.
Right.
Yep. So what makes our approach unique? I think we've talked about it a little bit, but the first one, in my opinion, that makes us unique is we focus on the process and the business owner, not just the exit transaction at the end.
Yeah. You can talk a lot, Tom, because especially on this one, because you brought in investment bankers when you guys exited. Talk about that.
Yeah. So, when you get to the point of exit, we did use investment bankers, used them several occasions, and then you've got all the other professionals, lawyers, accountants, and just a a whole cadre of people who are billing you by the hour. But what happens when you bring in, there is a time and place for all of those people. And so let's go back to investment bankers. When you bring in an investment banker, you are ready to transact. You are going to start the process of figuring out who you're going to sell to and how that deal is going to work. At that point, it's too late to build the value of your business. At that point, it pretty much is what it is. And the investment bankers do a great job of helping you find the right buyer, but that is way too late if you want to build the value of your business and you haven't focused on those intangibles, those four types of capital. It's 3 years prior at least is when you should have started focusing on those.
And I think this is such a big point because as you try to figure out growing or exiting, you need somebody on your side telling you or helping you decide what to do without being involved in the transaction. Because I know, especially in your case, Tom, you guys hit some really snags, right? You were trying to close during COVID.
Yep.
Numbers started changing. Was there anybody on that team that was telling you you should just wait?
No. I mean, and everybody involved in a transaction like that is getting paid if the transaction happens. So nobody's stepping back and saying, I'm just going to be a trusted advisor here and tell you what I think's best for you. They all, they're somewhat self-serving in that they're there to do a transaction, so they're going to do a transaction. They're going to continually recommend that you finish the transaction.
Yeah. And I think people are probably getting a pretty good idea that we're very relationship focused here at By Design Advisor. We believe in people. We want to partner. But I think that leads to the second bullet point of what our unique approach is we want to reignite the passion for what you do in both your business and your life, right? We talked about the grind. We talked about getting stuck. We talked about that plateau and maybe just throwing your hands up and say, you know what, I'm done. I want out of this. And we can help them, I think, through our processes, kind of find that passion for why they started it in the first place.
Yeah. And again, I don't think it's just exclusive to us. I think if you're looking for an advisor, this is what you should be looking for, right? And again, so many times people are looking in their business, thinking about selling. The first thing they do is they hire a lawyer or an accountant. Like, neither one of them are going to help you. And if you hire a business broker, he's a real estate guy. I mean, he only makes money in a transaction. So I think we have to look at that. The other thing we found, and this is to me the exciting part, is when you start to get what's next and you start to build the roadmap, we find, and I know I found it, was you start to find that passion again and you actually start to have a roadmap to grow it. And in our case, we had an initial offer that we turned down at one point. And it was hard, because I didn't know what to do. Steve didn't know what to do. Paul, one of our other partners, wanted out. And we were conflicted and we didn't have anybody there. And in the end, we decided to keep going. We said, it almost kind of, I think in that staring over the cliff, reignited our passion. And we grew the company significantly to make the next offer way higher than the first offer.
And that's the dream, right? We talked about the dream of a successful exit the very first slide. And to me, that is the dream.
That is the dream.
It is.
We had a similar experience in that we went through the process a long time ago. It ended up failing. We never got through the entire process of exiting the business. We learned a lot through that, and we learned that the value was not where we wanted it to be, and that if we were going to do this someday, we had to start building towards the value that we wanted.
Yeah.
And we got there.
And so I think sometimes if you think about it, even in that failure is success.
It's absolutely success.
And so many people get so caught up in once they go down, one is they lose sight of the business, they lose focus, they get excited about that number. And if something happens, it's almost like it's hard to recover, as opposed to just, hey, this is just a milestone and it's just telling me more of where am I and where I need to go.
Yeah, and I think all that's important. I think the other part we're in, we love doing the do. We love doing the do. We love the roadmap. We love to help you execute. But I think the other piece about our unique approach is we're here to prepare you with knowledge, right? Just here are the rules of the game. Here's what they look at. Here's how they score some of this stuff. And we want to give you that knowledge and value long before you're at that negotiating table trying to dot the I's and cross the T's.
Yep. and that's it's kind of too late at that point. Marty and I used to talk about this all the time, that it would be great if we had somebody we could talk to who is only interested in helping us and is not interested in their part in the deal, that could give us advice the whole way. And, I don't know that either one of us had that when we went through it, and that's what we're hoping to provide.
Well, I think it's what got us excited when we saw this. And again, we talk about in the discover phase, one of the things about helping to set value, and we're going to go in later sessions to talk more about this, but value is it's relatively simple. It's basic math. And when you look at that math, I think it helps us set it, when in actuality, most of us really, somebody says, what's your business worth? We're either going to be way underestimating or way overestimating, which only gets us in trouble. And so to me, going through this and helping to start put the pieces in place helps us to understand value, helps us to understand that roadmap. And again, this piece helps us decide whether to grow or exit.
So as we begin to wrap up, and you're looking to engage a team to help you with this, which we highly recommend that you do. What makes our team different? One, I think, is we're SEPA certified, right? We've taken the classes, we've done the education, we've put in the work to earn that certification. We're experienced, we've done it, we know how the movie ends. We have a proven methodology. We call it the way to value that helps drive value acceleration. We're experts in the human productivity tools. Again, as you notice, we put a lot of focus on the human capital piece, and we're experts in those tools. And we have CFO and CPA excellence on our team that can help you with your financials. The challenge we have for each of you is, will you be ready when that phone rings, when the call comes through, when somebody asks you the question of, hey, you ever think about selling your business? And the next question will be, will your business be ready? Don't leave your exit to chance. Ensure your path forward is by design. Intentionality, you heard it a lot today. That's what we do at By Design. And to get a hold of us, you can meet us on our website at bydesignadvisors.com. You can go to any of our LinkedIn pages and reach out to us there, or go to our YouTube channel and contact us there as well. So, Marty, I know you've been monitoring the chat for some questions that have come through. Let's try to get to a couple at least. I know we're running a little bit long.
Yeah. Our moderator sent them to me, and so that. But I want to say one last thing is, I love that line is, "Will you be ready?" Because I think that kind of sums up this whole thing is, how do we get ready? Will you be ready when the call comes? So great stuff, Dale, Tom. I really, just even listening gets my brain going. But we did get a number of questions. We can't do them all, but I think one of the first ones, which I think is what everybody's really asking, is, what does a typical engagement look like?
Yeah, I'll take this one. The typical engagement, we start with 90-day 35K engagement, where we come in, we do the assessments that we talked about, we learn about you, we learn about your business, we learn about what's keeping you up at night. And the key to that first 90 days is, again, just finding out, where are you now? And then from there, it's 90-day engagements, and we'll figure out that roadmap, and then we'll help you relentlessly execute the roadmap, and we go as long as you want us and need us there.
Yeah, so I think as we looked at it, right, the first 90 days are, we get into where are you and where you want to go. And then realistically, if you want to move forward, gets into the do section. So those become the 90-day execution. So 35K gets you started, first 90 days. And then from there, we'll start to prescribe a more detailed program.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and typically the 90-day sprints after that are not quite as involved as that initial assessment, so they're not quite as expensive as the initial 35K.
Yeah. Well, good. The second one, and I think this is also interesting, is there a certain size of company or market that we work with?
Yeah. I think we'll always say individually we'll look at it, but we're looking at that company that that has about $1 million in EBITDA currently, and is looking to grow that. Not to say we wouldn't dip underneath that, but yeah, that's kind of the starting point.
Yeah, I think on the high side, I think there really isn't any ceiling. So I think all kinds of different types of businesses and all different sizes. We've through our experience, have worked at or with or have owned companies of all kinds of sizes.
Yeah.
And I would
so-
probably just add to that, not to interrupt Marty, is just, maybe also they're looking at 3 to 5 years minimum before they're looking to exit or do anything like that.
Yeah.
Because again,
if I'm selling next week, are you guys the company for me?
we're probably not the best one.
So the other question that came in from the group is, will you do a specialized engagement and maybe not do the first 90 days, but is there other pieces that we could start with?
Of course. Yeah, like I said, when we talked about what makes our team different, we have vast experiences across, all business operations. So if there's a challenge, something keeping you up at night, yeah, we'll definitely have a conversation and figure it out.
Yeah, I think in those types of engagements could they look any kind of way. I mean, they could be maybe financially focused. I would think a lot of them may be people focused, and that's something that we would love to do.
Yeah, I think we do one-day engagements where we'll not only assess all your team, but build a team roadmap and actually help you sort of go through what a relentless execution exercise looks like. And so with your team, we can sit down and do a strategic session, at least to get you sort of warmed up to that. So I do think there are definitely options for whatever we want to do. I guess this might be the last question. I think we've gone for a while here, but how do we get started? Like if we want to do something with you, how would we get started?
Yeah, I think the best place, you can go to the website, bydesignadvisors.com. There's a button right there on the homepage, book a call. A 30-minute call is how we get started with everybody, right? We just want to learn a little bit more about you, a little more about your challenges, a little more about what you're looking to do, and then we take it from there.
Yeah, I think an introductory call always works really well because it'll help us get a little better feeling for what you're thinking, what you're struggling with, and then how we can help you. Anything last, Tom, to finish up here?
I think we hit it all.
You don't want to bring us home.
I got nothing.
I got nothing. I still don't know what to do with my hands. I'm really stuck. But again, Dale, turn it back to you.
Yeah, no, we just thank everybody for your time today. If you didn't get your questions in, feel free to send them in. We will answer them in future videos, emails, whatever. We will always willing to share our knowledge, and we love, like I said, we want to share lessons learned, the hard ones we learned, so you can learn them the easy way. So until next time, thank you.